Millionaire CEO married a homeless woman. But when she revealed her true identity, everyone was shocked. Welcome to Alcott Stories, where every tale is crafted to ignite your imagination and touch your heart. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share it with those who believe in love, redemption, and the beauty of second chances. Stay tuned for more incredible journeys, and let's dive into today's journey together. The rain fell in relentless sheets, thick and cold, turning the New York streets into rivers of silver reflections and fractured neon. A perfect mirror for Logan Pierce's hollow heart as he stepped out of the towering glass skyscraper that bore his name. Alone again, despite the power he wielded, the empire he had built, and the countless hands that shook his every day with ambition disguised as respect. He had just come from a brutal board meeting where his ideas were picked apart by men who smiled with knives in their eyes, and though he had spoken with poise, defended his vision, and kept his tone even, he walked away feeling scraped raw and empty, like a vessel filled with accolades, but drained of anything real. He ducked under the awning of a closed coffee shop, his $1,000 suit already clinging to his skin, his dark hair dripping onto his brow, and as he reached for the car service app on his phone, some faint, haunting sound, cut through the storm and made him pause. It was the melancholy wail of a violin. Broken, imperfect, yet achingly human, and it pulled at something deep within him, a forgotten ache he couldn't name. Curiosity, or perhaps desperation, for something real, tugged at him, and he followed the sound through the rain-slicked streets, down a set of cracked subway steps, nearly invisible in the storm's gloom, until he reached a dimly lit tunnel, where the hum of passing trains barely overpowered the fragile music echoing against the concrete walls. There, under a flickering light, stood a figure, drenched, shivering, wrapped in an old coat several sizes too big, and holding a battered violin with a missing string. Yet her posture was regal, her presence unmistakable, and even in her silence she seemed to radiate a quiet, unshakable strength. Her skin, rich and deep, glistened with rain, and her eyes, those eyes, caught his from across the tunnel like twin stars burning through fog, calm yet piercing, wounded yet proud. She didn't look at him like others did. She didn't recognize him, didn't shrink, didn't smile with pretense. She simply stared, assessing, not with fear or desperation, but with an almost defiant calm, as if she knew her worth even as the world ignored it. Logan stood frozen for a moment, transfixed, then slowly approached, unsure of what he would say or why he even cared. But as he got closer, he noticed her fingers, long, elegant, raw from the cold, still moving across the violin as if they were chasing a memory, playing not for money or attention, but simply because the music was the only voice she had left. "You'll catch your death out here," he said softly, the words sounding foreign even to him, and she looked up, her expression unreadable, a flicker of caution crossing her face, and she replied with a voice that was low, melodic, and composed. "There are worse things than death, sir." The response stunned him. Not just the words, but the way she said them, with no self-pity, no fear, just truth. And he realized he was looking at someone who had lived through storms far worse than rain. Compelled by something he didn't fully understand, he asked if she wanted a warm meal, just a small gesture, but one that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 hidden meanings, and after a moment's hesitation, she nodded, lowering her violin and tucking it beneath her coat like a sacred object. They walked together in silence, water sloshing underfoot, and Logan found himself hyper-aware of her presence, the way she moved, graceful despite her soaked shoes and threadbare clothes, as if she carried some invisible crown, and he wondered how the world had let someone like her fall through the cracks. In the back of his Blacktown car, the heater blasting, she didn't shiver. She sat upright, composed, eyes watching the city blur past, with a gaze that suggested she'd once known it differently, perhaps from a different height, perhaps from within different walls. And he didn't ask her name. Not yet, afraid that naming this moment might break its spell. When they reached his penthouse, she paused at the threshold, her hand resting on the doorframe as if weighing something unseen, and he said, "It's just for tonight. You'll be safe." And that word, safe, seemed to resonate, her shoulders softening as she stepped inside. The warmth hit them both like a wave, and for a second Logan saw her close her eyes, just briefly, as if letting herself feel comfort again. He handed her a towel, watched her dry her face with slow, deliberate motions, and as she sat on the edge of the plush sofa, he went to the kitchen, not summoning the chef, but cooking himself, a gesture he hadn't made in years. For some reason, it mattered. He made grilled cheese and tomato soup, simple, warm, nostalgic, and when he handed her the plate, she looked at him, not the food, and said, "Thank you," in a way that made his chest ache. They ate in silence, and yet the silence wasn't awkward. It was alive, filled with a tension that wasn't quite fear, wasn't quite desire, but something in between. When he finally asked her name, she hesitated before saying, "Naomi," and the way she said it, carefully, almost sadly, made him wonder if it was her real name or a piece of armor. He didn't push, didn't pry, just nodded and said, "I'm Logan," even though he knew she probably already knew, and she responded with a half smile, the first one he'd seen, and it was like watching dawn break through storm clouds. That night, he set up the guest room for her, offering fresh clothes, towels, and privacy, and when she disappeared behind the door, he stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at it, feeling something awaken inside him he hadn't known was sleeping, something beyond attraction, beyond pity, something like recognition. And as he lay in bed, unable to sleep, he found his mind replaying her voice, her eyes, her stillness, and the way she held that broken violin like it was a piece of her soul. Across the hall, Naomi lay awake too, curled beneath the softest blanket she'd touched in years, surrounded by silence so thick it made her ears ring, and she stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, not from fear, but from confusion, because this man, this stranger, had looked at her like she mattered, and that terrified her more than any cold night on the streets ever had. Naomi lay beneath unfamiliar softness, her eyes tracing invisible shapes on the ceiling of a world that felt too clean, too quiet, too unreal. Every breath she took felt borrowed, like the air in this place wasn't meant for someone like her, like it would run out the moment someone decided she didn't belong. But the silence didn't press down like the subway tunnels did. It hummed, almost waiting. She sat up slowly, her fingers brushing the edges of the blanket, lingering there, unsure if it would vanish if she let go. In the other room, Logan sat on the edge of his bed, shirtless, his mind nowhere near rest, staring at the floor, like it might offer answers, Something about Naomi unsettled him, not in a way that frightened him, but in a way that unearthed things he had buried long ago. Curiosity, compassion, vulnerability. He ran a hand through his hair, stood, and walked barefoot down the hall. They met in the kitchen, both pretending they hadn't been hoping to see the other. Naomi wore the oversized sweater he left on the bed for her. It hung past her hips, sleeves swallowing her hands, but the way she carried herself made it look like silk. She leaned against the counter, watching him with that same unreadable expression. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Too quiet," she said, her voice like dusk, low and soft, but heavy with things unsaid. Logan moved to the stove, almost grateful for the distraction. "Want something warm?" he offered. Naomi hesitated, eyes flicking toward the front door as if weighing her escape, then back to him. "If it's not too much trouble," she said, voice polite, distant. "Never," he replied, already pulling ingredients from the fridge. He made something simple, sautéed spinach and eggs on toast, dusted with sea salt. She sat at the counter as he cooked, the clinking of utensils and the low sizzle of the pan filling the air with a rhythm that felt almost domestic. When he placed the plate in front of her, she studied it for a second, then looked up at him. "You cook?" she asked, a faint smirk tugging at one corner of her mouth. Logan leaned against the opposite counter, arms folded. "Only when it matters," he said, and for a second their eyes held. Something soft, something searching. She took a bite. "It's good," she murmured, and he smiled, something small but sincere. Silence settled again, but it was different now. Naomi broke it. "You're not what I expected," she said. Logan raised an eyebrow. "And what did you expect?" "The usual," she replied. Cold voice, fast car, a face that forgets people as soon as it turns away. He was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I used to be that," he admitted. "But lately, I'm not sure I recognize the man in the mirror." Naomi's gaze softened. "You still look like him." "And you?" he asked. "What do people expect when they see you?" Naomi sipped from the glass of water he placed beside her. "Mostly nothing," she said. "Sometimes pity, sometimes fear." She paused, tapping her fingers lightly on the counter. "But they never expect me to have a story, or thoughts, or worth." Her voice was even, not bitter, but so honest it burned. Logan leaned forward slightly. "But you do," he said. "I see that." Naomi looked at him, truly looked. "Why?" she asked. "Why care?" He shrugged slightly. "Because I've met 1,000 people with polished shoes and expensive words who never made me feel anything. And then you played a broken violin in a tunnel and cracked something open in me I thought was stone." Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, a flicker of something flickered in her eyes. Vulnerability, not hidden behind walls, but laid bare. "You speak like you've forgotten how to be empty," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Maybe you reminded me." They finished the meal slowly, conversation unfolding, like thread pulled carefully from a tangled spool. She spoke about music, not her past, never her past, but about how sound could hold pain and beauty in the same note. He spoke about building an empire that somehow left him feeling smaller. Naomi asked questions, real ones, piercing ones, that dug deeper than his press interviews or therapist ever had. "What did you want to be before you became who they made you?" she asked at one point. Logan paused, then said quietly, "Free." She nodded. Freedom costs more than most people can afford. As dawn began to stretch fingers of pale light across the skyline, they sat in the living room, not touching, not moving, just breathing the same air. There was no pretense, no flirtation, just two souls sitting side by side, bruised by different battles, but somehow stitched together in a moment neither of them had expected. Naomi looked out the window. "I'll leave after sunrise," she said, more to herself than him. Logan looked at her. "You don't have to," he said. "You can stay." She didn't answer, not directly, but she didn't get up either. Instead, she said, "Tonight, it was warm," and her voice cracked, just a little, like a line in porcelain. Logan heard it, the emotion she couldn't name, the grief she'd long ago buried alive. "So was the meal," she added, her fingers lightly brushing the empty plate. Then she looked at him, and for the first time her walls lowered just enough to let him see it. A storm of memory behind those eyes. Sorrow, not for pity, but for truth. "Thank you," she said softly. And in that moment, Logan realized it wasn't the warmth of food or blankets she meant. It was the warmth of being seen, of not being invisible, of feeling human again. And in his chest, something unfamiliar stirred. Not lust, not guilt, but the early, terrifying flutter of something real. Neither of them said another word, but as the sky began to blush with morning light, two strangers sat in stillness, unknowingly building a fragile beginning on the coldest night either of them had known. The soft orange glow of morning had stretched further into the penthouse, brushing across polished surfaces and expensive furniture that somehow felt less cold than they had the night before. Logan stood near the window, coffee in hand, watching the skyline blink awake. He hadn't slept. Not really. Not after the way Naomi had looked at him. Not after the quiet honesty between them that felt heavier than any confession. Naomi was sitting at the far end of the sofa, curled up with her knees pulled to her chest, wearing that same oversized sweater, still barefoot, still alert in a way that suggested survival was stitched into her muscles. She looked toward him occasionally, not speaking, and he didn't push. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was thick with weight, but not uncomfortable. It felt like two lives adjusting to the echo of each other's presence. Finally, he broke the quiet. "I have a question," he said, turning from the window. Naomi raised a brow. "You always ask permission first." "Only when I care about the answer," he said without blinking. She tilted her head. "Go ahead." He stepped forward, setting his cup down on the counter. "I know you don't want charity. So, what if I offered you work? Temporary, flexible, cleaning, organizing, just the apartment. Nothing beneath you. Just something honest." Naomi stared at him, searching his face for something. Maybe the catch, maybe the pity. But it wasn't there. His expression was sincere, even careful. She looked away, thinking. "You're not trying to fix me, are you?" she asked softly. Logan shook his head. I think I'm trying to build something with someone who sees the cracks in the walls better than I do." She considered that, then nodded. "Okay," she said. "But if I'm doing this, you're going to get used to seeing your home the way it actually is." He laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm. "Deal." That morning, Naomi started quietly. She cleaned with methodical focus, moving room to room with a quiet grace that gave the space new life. Logan watched her from his office, pretending to type while stealing glances. Her rhythm, the way she hummed under her breath, the careful way she handled even fragile things. There was something sacred in the way she moved. And when she found a stack of untouched mail he hadn't opened in weeks, she set it neatly beside his laptop with a note. Avoiding the mess doesn't make it disappear. He smiled at that. It was the first of many small things. Days passed like softened film reels, moments slipping in that felt ordinary on the surface, but left deep impressions. One morning, Naomi spilled coffee on the marble island while reaching for a cup too high for her. Logan walked in just as it happened, ready to scold whoever had left a stain, until he saw her standing there, frozen, embarrassed. But instead of anger, he grabbed a towel and said, "Well, that's the most human this place has looked in years." She blinked, then laughed. Not a small chuckle, but a full, uncontrolled, chest-shaking laugh that made her eyes crinkle and her shoulders relax. He found himself laughing too, and just like that, the cold edge of the penthouse cracked a little. Another evening, Logan came home, later than usual. The apartment was dim, music low in the background, old jazz records she'd found in a forgotten cabinet. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, coat half off, listening. She didn't speak either. She just nodded toward the kitchen, where she'd left him dinner on a plate. He walked over, not hungry, but touched, and sat down. She joined him after a while. No words, just presence. And then came the night of his nightmare. It wasn't rare for Logan to wake up sweating, heart racing from dreams he could never remember, but always feared. But that night, it was different. He woke with a choked breath, sitting upright, panic in his chest. And she was there, standing in the doorway in silence, as if she'd felt the storm through the walls. He didn't speak, couldn't, but she walked in anyway, slowly, and sat on the edge of the bed. No questions, no analysis, just sat. Her hand didn't touch him, but the space between them was enough to ground him. After a while, she whispered something, not words of comfort, not advice, but a line of poetry, low and melodic. Even shadows fall asleep when someone stays near long enough. And something in him unclenched. The mornings after grew easier. They began sharing small routines, coffee together, her cleaning while he worked in silence, him asking her to recommend music, her leaving dog-eared books on his desk. There was never talk of the past, never needling. But the bond stitched tighter with every gesture. She began to tease him. He began to ask for her opinion on things, design choices, stocks, even speeches. She offered honest thoughts, often blunt, sometimes poetic, and he started changing things based on what she said. The unspoken became louder than any admission. When she brushed past him, they both felt it. When they laughed at the same time and looked away too quickly, it echoed in the silence that followed. When she reached over his shoulder to grab something, and he inhaled sharply without realizing, they both noticed. But neither spoke it aloud. It would have broken the spell. One night she was standing on the balcony, wrapped in a shawl, staring out at the city lights. Logan joined her, wordless, handing her a glass of wine. "You ever feel like you're floating above a world you don't belong to?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Every day," he answered. She turned to him. "Do you ever want to fall?" He looked at her then, eyes deep with something he couldn't yet say. "Only if someone's there to catch me." They stood there a long time, close but not touching, hearts on the edge of something terrifying. And as the city pulsed below, Naomi whispered, "This doesn't feel temporary." Logan didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, the woman who had come from nowhere and yet now occupied the quiet places inside him. Then, finally, he said, "Neither do you." And though no kiss passed between them, and no confession was spoken, The wind that blew through the balcony that night carried a silent promise that something had begun, something fragile, uncertain, and sacred. Something that neither of them would dare name, but both of them already felt deep in their bones. The night air wrapped around them as they stood on the balcony, the glow of the city stretching endlessly beneath them like a restless ocean of lights. Naomi tightened the shawl around her shoulders, her fingers twitching as if debating whether to hold on to the railing or herself. Logan stood just a breath away, the warmth of his presence brushing her skin like a question neither of them dared to ask out loud. The wineglass in her hand had gone untouched. They weren't talking anymore. Not because there was nothing to say, but because they both knew the next words would matter too much. Naomi was the first to speak, her voice a fragile thread. "You ever feel like memories can rot inside you?" Logan turned toward her, his profile lit by soft reflections from the glass behind them. "Yeah," he murmured, "like they're trapped under the floorboards, scratching to get out." She exhaled, a sound that almost resembled a laugh. "Exactly that." A long pause followed. Then she whispered, "Sometimes I still hear his voice when I try to sleep." Logan didn't ask whose. He didn't have to. Instead, he gently leaned on the railing beside her, eyes on the horizon. "My father had a voice like thunder," he said. "But all it ever did was make the ground beneath me feel unsafe." Naomi turned, studying his face. He didn't look broken, but he looked like someone who knew how to carry broken things carefully. "Did he love you?" she asked. Logan hesitated. He loved the version of me that made his name look good on paper. Naomi nodded slowly. That kind of love hurts worse than hate. Silence wrapped around them again. She stepped back into the apartment, and he followed, the cityscape fading behind them like a stage curtain lowering after the first act. Naomi sat on the edge of the couch, fingers tangling with the fringe of the shawl, eyes low. "There was a man once," she said, "who told me the bruises were proof that I mattered." Logan didn't move. He simply listened, the kind of listening that made silence feel like safety. "And I believed him," she continued, "because the world had already told me I wasn't enough. I thought pain was the price of staying wanted." He crossed the room, slowly, and lowered himself to the floor in front of her, not touching, not speaking, just existing in the same fragile space. Naomi blinked back the dampness in her eyes, then smiled, but it was a hollow, aching thing. "You ever wonder if you're just a collection of what other people left behind?" Logan nodded. "Every day." She looked at him, really looked, and something inside her softened. "But with you," she said quietly, "it's like the silence doesn't accuse me of anything." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I don't know why." He reached out, then, not grabbing, not pulling, just letting his fingers hover inches from hers. "Because I don't need to understand every chapter of your story to care how it ends," he said. Naomi's hand trembled before it met his. Their fingers locked, not like a firework, but like something slowly blooming after too many winters. She looked at their hands, then into his eyes. "You scare me," she whispered. Logan swallowed. "Why?" "Because you don't make me feel invisible, and I forgot what it's like to want to be seen." A long pause. Then Logan leaned closer, not fast, not sure, but full of the kind of aching intention that came from restraint worn thin. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said, his voice barely audible. "But if you ever want to, I'll be here. All of me." No running. She didn't pull away. She leaned in. And when their lips met, it wasn't soft. It wasn't clean. It was everything they'd been avoiding. Raw, trembling, imperfect. Naomi gripped the front of his shirt like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Logan kissed her like she was the only truth he'd ever been sure of. There was no performance in it. No hunger for more than the moment. It was the kind of kiss that hurt, because it meant too much. Their breath tangled. Her hand slid to the back of his neck. His thumb brushed her jaw like it was fragile crystal. And when they finally broke apart, foreheads resting together, neither of them spoke. Because sometimes the deepest things don't come in words. They come in closeness, in tremors, in the quiet, knowing that something irreversible has just happened. And in that hush, Naomi let a tear fall, not from pain, but from the terrifying relief of being wanted without being used. The room was still humming with the remnants of their kiss, an unspoken understanding hanging between them like the air before a storm. Logan's breath was unsteady, his heart loud in his chest as he drew back slightly, his hand still resting against her cheek. For a moment, they just stood there, the weight of their silence heavier than any words they could have spoken. Naomi's eyes were closed, as though she needed to feel this moment, this fragile, beautiful moment, before the world outside came rushing back. Logan's voice was soft, almost tentative. "Naomi, I want you to come with me." Her eyes fluttered open, searching his face for meaning. "Come where?" "A gala. It's an event for my company. I need a +1. He hesitated, then added, "I want you to be that +1. Naomi stiffened, pulling away slightly. "Logan, no. You're asking the impossible." Her voice was quieter now, laced with a growing panic. "You want me to walk into a room full of people who think they know everything, think they have everything figured out?" He stepped forward, his hands gently holding her shoulders. "Naomi, you are so much more than what anyone in that room will see. You are not your past. You are you, strong, intelligent, capable of standing toe-to-toe with anyone, no matter who they are. And you don't have to prove anything to anyone." Her heart raced in her chest as she pulled away, the words falling from her lips in a whisper of fear. "But they'll see me. They'll know. They'll see how different I am. They won't just see me, Logan. They'll see the person I used to be." He didn't back down, his gaze unwavering. "They'll see us. We'll face them together." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm not asking you to. Please, come with me. Show them what I already know." The sincerity in his eyes was enough to make her heart flutter with something she couldn't name, something that pulled her closer despite the storm brewing inside her. For a moment, Naomi was quiet, her thoughts tangled in knots of fear and uncertainty. But when she looked back at Logan, the warmth in his gaze felt like an anchor in a stormy sea. She nodded slowly, almost against her own better judgment. "Okay," she said, barely above a whisper. "Okay, I'll come." The night of the gala arrived, and the anticipation in the air was palpable. Naomi stood in front of the mirror in the guest bedroom of Logan's penthouse, her hands trembling as she ran them over the fabric of the borrowed gown. The dress, a shimmering silver creation that hugged her frame, felt like something foreign to her. It was beautiful, yes, but it didn't feel like her. It felt like something she was playing dress-up in, like a mask that didn't fit. Her reflection stared back at her. An elegant stranger, transformed by the glimmering lights of luxury. Her heart skipped a beat when she heard Logan's voice from the hallway. "Naomi, you're ready?" The soft knock on the door made her jump, and she quickly wiped her palms on the dress before opening it. When she saw Logan standing there, dressed in his sleek black tuxedo, her breath caught in her throat. He was impossibly handsome, every inch of him radiating confidence. But it wasn't just his looks that struck her. It was the way his eyes softened when they met hers, the way his gaze lingered on her, like he saw her for more than just the woman in the gown. "You look stunning," Logan said, his voice low, a quiet reverence in his words. She could see the appreciation in his eyes, but also something deeper, a recognition of the courage it took for her to step into this world. Naomi swallowed, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "These people are—" She trailed off, unsure of how to finish that thought without feeling like a fraud. Logan smiled softly, his hand reaching out to take hers. "You do belong here," he said, his thumb gently tracing the back of her hand. "And I'm not asking you to be anyone else. Just be you." With a deep breath, she nodded. Together, they stepped into the elevator, heading down toward the awaiting car that would take them into the heart of Logan's world. The seconds after Logan's confession felt like hours. Naomi's heart thundered in her chest, but her lips remained sealed. His words, "I'm falling in love with you," echoed in her mind, over and over, louder than any noise in the room. But her body refused to respond, frozen in place as panic clawed at her insides. She had promised herself she wouldn't get close to anyone. She had sworn to keep the past buried, where no one could find it. But Logan was here, standing before her, with a look in his eyes that made it impossible to deny the truth any longer. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything. But her throat felt tight, suffocated by the weight of her secret. "Naomi." Logan's voice was soft, almost hesitant, but there was something deeper in it, something that made her heart ache. He was waiting for her response, but there was no way she could give him the answer he deserved without tearing herself open. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. The moment was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't hold on to it. "Logan," she whispered, her voice shaking. I can't say it back." His expression faltered, a slight flicker of hurt crossing his features, before he masked it with a quiet understanding. "You don't have to say anything, Naomi. I just wanted you to know." There was so much more she wanted to say, but she couldn't. Not yet. She had spent so long running from the past, burying it beneath layers of silence and self-doubt. It was easier to keep it hidden, safer. But Logan wouldn't let her. He was a force she couldn't fight, a man who had already begun to break through her walls, whether she was ready or not. She opened her mouth to speak again, but was interrupted by a sudden, sharp knock on the door. Her heart lurched in her chest. The sound of it was like an omen, a warning she couldn't ignore. She glanced at Logan, but his gaze was still fixed on her, concerned, waiting. "I have to go," she said, her voice cracking as she stood quickly, backing away from him. "I need to go." Before he could stop her, Naomi hurried to the door, but as her hand touched the handle, a sharp pain suddenly sliced through her side, followed by the sound of a familiar, guttural voice. "You think you can just leave me behind?" The door slammed open with a violent force, and Naomi stumbled back, her hand clutching her side. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall, with a menacing presence, and the same cold, unfeeling eyes that haunted her memories. Her past had caught up with her in a way she had never imagined. Logan stepped forward, instinctively blocking Naomi from the man's view, his posture tense, but it was Naomi's voice that cut through the air. "No," she whispered, her breath ragged. "No, you don't get to do this." The man sneered, taking a step closer. "You think you can just walk away? You think I won't find you again?" His words were like daggers, each one aimed directly at Naomi's heart. "You'll never escape me." Logan's jaw clenched, his anger rising. "Get out! Now!" But Naomi didn't move, didn't respond. The years of silence, of running, were finally coming to a head, and it was like the world was crashing in on her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She was trapped in a moment she had long feared. The man took another step forward, but before he could say anything else, Logan's hand shot out, gripping his arm with a force that made Naomi flinch. "You don't want to test me," Logan warned, his voice low, cold and steady. It was enough to make the man hesitate, a flash of uncertainty in his eyes before he turned, storming out of the apartment with a muttered curse. Naomi collapsed against the wall, clutching her side as the pain intensified. It was sharp, searing, something she'd grown all too familiar with over the years. But this time, it wasn't just physical. The emotional weight of everything, her past, her secrets, her fear, was too much. She was drowning in it, and there was no way to swim to the surface. Logan was by her side in an instant, his arms wrapping around her as she slid to the floor, her vision blurring with the pain and the sudden rush of emotions. He didn't ask questions. He just held her, strong and steady. His hands were gentle, but the worry in his eyes was undeniable. "Naomi," he whispered, his voice thick with concern. "You're hurt. I need to take care of you." She could barely hear him over the ringing in her ears, but when she looked up at him, her chest tightened. The words were stuck in her throat, but the truth she had been so terrified to say, was finally spilling out. "I never wanted to love anyone," she choked, her voice breaking. "I thought if I kept running, kept hiding, I could keep everyone safe. I didn't want to be weak. I couldn't let anyone see me like this." Broken. Logan's eyes softened as he pulled her closer, his arms a shield around her trembling form. "You're not broken, Naomi. You're not weak. You're one of the strongest people I know." His voice trembled slightly. "You've survived things I can't even imagine." She shook her head, her tears spilling freely now. "I never told you the truth, Logan. She paused, choking on the words, but the dam was already breaking. "I can't keep running, but I don't know how to stop." Logan's hand gently cupped her face, lifting her gaze to meet his. His eyes were full of something she hadn't allowed herself to see in years. Love, but more than that, understanding. "You don't have to run anymore," he said softly. "You don't have to carry this alone. Whatever it is, whatever you're afraid of, I'm here." Her chest ached as she let go of the final pieces of her wall, breaking down in his arms. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future where she didn't have to fight alone, where the shadows of her past didn't have to control her. In that moment, as she let herself fall into him, she realized that this wasn't just about her. It was about them, about the fragile, beautiful connection they had, and the chance at something more. something real. And for the first time in years, Naomi allowed herself to hope. For the next few days, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Logan's apartment felt quieter than it ever had before, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Naomi had tried to retreat into herself after the encounter with her past, unable to face Logan completely, still reeling from the truth she had barely begun to share. But Logan, ever patient, never pushed. He simply gave her space, his presence a steady reminder that she wasn't alone. Yet she could feel the change between them, an undeniable shift. Every glance he gave her, every word he spoke, held the weight of something bigger than the present moment. It was as if he was waiting for her to take the next step. She didn't know if she was ready for it. She didn't know if she could ever be ready. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Logan did something she hadn't expected at all. It was a quiet night, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, the sound of a piano gently filling the space. Naomi was sitting by the window, staring out at the world that felt so far beyond her reach, when she felt the brush of Logan's hand against her back. He was standing there, holding something, a small, velvet box. "Naomi," he said, his voice low, a tremor of vulnerability beneath it that made her turn around. He dropped to one knee before her, the room suddenly too small, the air thick with emotion. "You've shown me more than I ever thought possible. You've allowed me into parts of you that no one else ever has. And it's because of you that I'm standing here, asking you something that's terrified me for a long time." Her heart stopped. The box was open now, revealing a simple, elegant ring, a symbol of the future he was offering, a future he was ready to build with her. "Naomi," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "I love you. I'm in love with you, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air between them, too heavy to escape, yet impossible to ignore. Naomi's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, her mind spinning. Her pulse pounded in her ears as memories of her past came crashing back. Every rejection, every betrayal, every reason she had given herself to keep her heart closed. She had never believed in forever. She had never believed that love could be a safe place, not for someone like her. Logan's voice softened, as if he could hear the war inside her mind. "I know it's scary," he whispered, standing up and taking her hands in his. "I know you've been through things that you don't want to revisit, things that have made you doubt yourself, but none of that matters to me. You matter to me. All of you. Every piece of you." Tears welled up in Naomi's eyes, her heart a jumble of fear and longing. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. She wasn't supposed to fall in love again. She wasn't supposed to let herself trust someone this deeply. She hadn't even told him the whole truth about her past, the darkness that still haunted her. But in that moment, as Logan's hands gently held hers, she realized that he had already seen her at her lowest, and he hadn't turned away. He hadn't left. And yet, despite everything she had felt, despite the love that had quietly bloomed between them, a small voice in the back of her mind screamed, "What if you break him? What if your past destroys everything?" Her breath hitched, her eyes flicking away from Logan's gaze, unable to meet the sincerity in his. "Logan, She choked on the words, her throat tight with the weight of all her fears. "I'm not who you think I am. I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. I've hurt people. You don't know. You don't know the things I've done, the things I've survived." Logan's expression softened, a deep, unwavering understanding in his eyes. "Naomi," he said, lifting her chin gently so that she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to be someone you're not. I just need you to be you, the person who has shown me kindness, the person who has stood by me when I didn't deserve it. That's all I want. That's all I need." Her chest tightened, her emotions spilling over the edge as the tears she had been holding back for so long finally fell. "I'm scared, Logan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm scared that I'll ruin everything, that I'm not enough for you, that my past will destroy us." Logan's hands cupped her face, his thumb gently brushing away the tears that slid down her cheeks. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, Naomi. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that we can face the future together, no matter what it holds. You are enough, Naomi. You have always been enough." The words were like a balm to the rawness inside her, soothing the jagged edges of the fear and pain she had carried for so long. For the first time, Naomi realized that maybe she could trust again. Maybe love was possible, even for someone like her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment she had been waiting for. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, caught between the fear of the unknown and the possibility of a future with the man who had never given up on her. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. And then her voice, so small, so trembling, broke the stillness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Logan's eyes lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her fiercely, as if he was sealing the promise with the depth of his love. Naomi's heart raced as she let herself fall into him, letting go of the walls she had spent so long building. In that kiss, in that moment, she realized that for the first time in her life, she didn't have to run. She didn't have to hide. Logan loved her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for her to believe in a future where she wasn't defined by her past. A future where love could heal and grow, where they could face everything together. And when they finally broke apart, Logan's voice was a soft promise in the air between them. "You're everything to me, Naomi, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Tears still lingered in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, tears of hope. She had chosen love, and in that choice she realized she was finally choosing herself. The days leading up to their wedding were nothing short of a whirlwind. Logan's love for Naomi felt like a dream he never wanted to wake from. Every touch, every whispered word between them, only deepened his conviction that they were meant to build a life together. The planning was simple. There was no need for extravagance when all that mattered was their connection. He couldn't wait to marry her, to make a promise he had already made in his heart. For the first time in years, everything felt right. But in the midst of their joy, Naomi had started to pull away. A slight unease in her gaze whenever she looked at him. A subtle tension in her body that Logan couldn't ignore. She'd become quieter. Her mind clearly far away, even as she smiled for him, even as she laughed. He could feel her slipping, just as he had felt her wall slowly lowering over the past months. But she was still hiding, still holding something back. Logan tried to convince himself it was just pre-wedding nerves, that it was natural for Naomi to feel some anxiety before such a huge change. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to unravel, and he had no idea just how right he was. The morning the storm hit, Logan's phone buzzed incessantly, the screen flashing with notifications. It was unusual, considering how much time he had been spending in their bubble, away from the outside world. Still, he had grown accustomed to his work demands, so he picked up the phone while Naomi was still asleep, her breathing soft and steady beside him. A simple headline caught his eye. "The daughter of a disgraced diplomat is alive and set to marry a billionaire." Logan's breath caught in his chest, his heart dropping into his stomach as his eyes frantically scanned the article. The words blurred as they hit him like a sledgehammer. Naomi Ilara, once presumed dead after a scandal that rocked the world of diplomacy and technology, is alive and well. The daughter of former African diplomat and tech mogul Kofi Ilara has resurfaced with a new identity. Her disappearance, along with a scandal involving stolen technological innovations and political corruption, had been one of the most talked about mysteries of the decade. Naomi Ilara, once a tech prodigy, vanished after the collapse of her father's empire in a spectacular scandal that left her presumed dead in a crash, a theory that the media believed had buried her story for good. The article continued with more detailed information, painting Naomi's family history in a devastating light. It told of Naomi's father's fall from grace, the accusations of fraud and manipulation, and the mysterious circumstances that had led to her disappearance. The media speculated that Naomi had disappeared to escape the public fallout, to shed the weight of a ruined legacy. And now, Naomi was not just living in the shadows of her past, she was about to marry Logan Hayes, the heir to one of the most powerful corporate empires in the world. Logan's mind raced as the gravity of the situation crashed down on him. His hand trembled as he scrolled through the rest of the article, the comments, and the threads that exploded online. Naomi had always been quiet about her past, never going into specifics, but he never could have imagined the magnitude of the secret she'd been carrying. Suddenly, the silence in the room was deafening. He looked over at Naomi, still sleeping peacefully beside him, unaware of the storm that had just broken. He felt like the floor had just given way beneath him, his world shifting with a suddenness that left him breathless. How could she not tell me? His thoughts were spinning, his heart heavy with betrayal. But he couldn't focus on that. Not yet. He needed to know the truth from her, from Naomi herself. He needed to hear it from her lips. Logan stood, pacing the room. His thoughts raced with a mixture of hurt and confusion. He had thought they were building something real, something that could withstand anything. But now, everything felt tainted. Could he trust her? Was this who she really was? The woman he loved? Or someone hiding behind an elaborate lie? Naomi stirred, and Logan's heart caught in his throat. She opened her eyes, her expression warm at first, but then noticing his tense posture, the way he stood there staring at his phone as if it had burned him. "Logan?" she asked softly, sitting up, her voice groggy but filled with concern. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. He felt the weight of the world on him, the truth in the air between them, like an invisible wall. But he couldn't hold back. He needed to ask. "Naomi," he said, his voice strained, "there's something I need to know. Something I just found out." Her eyes widened as she saw the anguish in his expression. She opened her mouth, then hesitated, her body tensing. "I need you to tell me the truth," Logan said, the words raw as they left his mouth. "Who are you, really?" Naomi's face went pale. The room seemed to tilt, the air thick with the weight of the moment. She slowly stood up from the bed, backing away from him as if trying to escape the words she knew were coming. "Logan, I wanted to tell you," she said, her voice shaking. "But I couldn't. I couldn't risk losing you." Logan felt his chest tighten. His throat was dry, the betrayal sitting heavily in the pit of his stomach. He didn't know what to say, how to make sense of what had been ripped wide open. "You didn't think I had a right to know? You didn't think I deserved to know who you really were?" His voice cracked with pain. "Naomi, how could you keep this from me?" Tears welled in Naomi's eyes as she stepped closer, her hands shaking. "I was trying to protect you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't want you to see me the way the world sees me, as the daughter of a man whose life was destroyed by scandal. I didn't want you to look at me and only see that past, the things I can't escape, things I can never change." Logan's breath hitched. Her words cut through him like a blade, but beneath the hurt, he could hear the vulnerability in her voice, the depth of the fear that had been holding her back. "I wanted to be someone new for you," she continued, her voice barely audible. "But I see now. I've ruined everything." Logan's heart cracked as he watched her crumble before him. His anger, his confusion, it all melted away, replaced with a deep sorrow for what she had been through, for the burden she had carried alone. He took a step toward her, reaching out to gently take her hand in his. "Naomi," he said softly, his voice laced with compassion. "This doesn't change how I feel about you. Your past doesn't define who you are. But you have to let me in. You have to trust me." She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment all she could do was nod. "I don't want to lose you, Logan," she whispered. "You won't," he replied, pulling her into his arms, holding her as if the world had already come crashing down around them. "We'll face this together, no matter what." The chaos erupted the very next day. Logan was no stranger to pressure. He had spent years in boardrooms, navigating corporate sharks and high-stakes negotiations. But nothing could have prepared him for the storm that broke over him when the world learned the truth about Naomi. The media frenzy intensified as more details emerged, with Naomi's name splashed across every headline. Her father's fall from grace, her supposed death, and now her resurfacing as Logan's fiancée. It was the kind of scandal that devoured everything in its path. And the worst part was, no one was interested in her side of the story. Logan sat in his office, surrounded by the same walls that had always felt like a fortress, walls that suddenly felt too small, suffocating. His board members were growing restless, their faces grim and stern as they argued among themselves. The pressure to distance himself from Naomi was palpable. His investors had already started to pull away, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. "Logan," one of the board members said coldly, his words clipped, "you need to reconsider your position. The company's value is dropping by the hour. Your personal life is threatening everything we've worked for. If you don't cut ties with her, we'll have no choice but to act." Each word felt like a slap in the face, but Logan didn't flinch. He had fought his entire life to build his empire, and he had fought just as hard to build something with Naomi. There was no way he was going to let it all crumble now. But as the hours passed, things only worsened. The media was relentless, finding new angles, digging into every possible corner of Naomi's past. Some outlets even began to question the legitimacy of their relationship, implying that Naomi had ulterior motives for getting close to Logan. There were whispers, murmurs, and accusations that he was blinded by love, that he had been manipulated. Logan tried to focus, tried to keep his attention on his company, but all he could think about was Naomi. The pain of her absence was unbearable. She had been by his side through everything, had shared his quiet moments, his fears, his dreams. And now she was gone. It was late in the evening when Logan returned home, his mind reeling with meetings, calls, and negotiations. He opened the door to an empty apartment. The silence hit him like a wave, crashing against his chest. He called her name softly, but the sound felt hollow in the empty space. There was no answer. And then, on the kitchen counter, he saw it. A note written in Naomi's delicate handwriting, a final message she had left for him. He picked it up, his heart pounding, as he read the words that would forever haunt him. You deserve someone without shadows. The note trembled in his hand. 1,000 thoughts crashed into his mind at once. Where had she gone? Why hadn't she said anything to him? Was this it? Was she really leaving him? He sank down onto the couch, the weight of everything crushing him. The emotional toll, the financial ruin, the betrayal. He couldn't breathe. His hands were shaking as he tried to make sense of it all. How could she leave him like this? He had told her over and over that they would face it together, that he would never let her go. But now, Naomi was gone, disappearing like a phantom into the night. The silence in their home was deafening. The space between them now so vast it felt impossible to bridge. His heart ached with the absence of her, with the unanswered questions that lingered in the air. Why hadn't she trusted him? Why had she chosen to walk away, to hide from him when all he had wanted was to stand beside her? Hours passed, the night stretching on without an answer. Logan tried to reach her, called, texted, even contacted a few of her friends. But there was no response. His mind spun in circles, consumed by the one question he couldn't answer. Where was she? He paced back and forth, the weight of everything crashing down on him. His life, once so carefully curated, was falling apart. His investors were pulling out. The company was on the brink of disaster. His reputation was in tatters, and Naomi, his Naomi, was gone. But deep inside, despite the pain, the fear, the loss, something inside Logan refused to break. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not when he had finally found something worth fighting for. I love her, he thought fiercely. I love her. And I won't lose her. Logan stood, determination flooding through him as he grabbed his coat and keys. He wasn't going to let her slip away into the shadows of her past. He couldn't let her believe that she wasn't worthy of love, that she didn't deserve him. If she was hiding, running from the world and from herself, he would find her. He would remind her that she didn't have to face it alone. The world could say whatever it wanted. The press could continue to spin their stories. But Logan knew the truth. Naomi had a heart that had been shattered, a soul that had been bruised, and yet she had chosen to love him, to trust him. He couldn't let that go, not without a fight. The streets were empty as Logan drove through the night, his mind focused solely on finding her, wherever she had gone. He couldn't let fear control him. not when it came to Naomi. He had always prided himself on being a man of power, of control. But now, in this moment, he realized that the only thing that truly mattered to him was the woman he loved, the woman who had slipped away from him without a word, the woman he was going to fight for. No matter what, as dawn broke, casting the world in a soft, golden light, Logan knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't stop until he found Naomi. He would move mountains if he had to, because no matter what the world said, he wasn't letting go of her. Not now. Not ever. Logan couldn't think straight. The night stretched before him like a blur of uncertainty as he drove through the empty streets, his mind replaying Naomi's words, the note she left behind, over and over again. You deserve someone without shadows. What did that even mean? The words cut deeper the more he tried to understand them. It was clear she loved him. He could feel it in the way she looked at him, in every shared moment. But something had broken within her, something he couldn't quite touch, couldn't quite fix. And now she had left, disappeared like a ghost from his life. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a constant reminder of the life waiting for him, his investors, his board. They were all clamoring for answers, their demands only making the weight heavier. His company was unraveling without Naomi there beside him. But Logan didn't care. He didn't care about anything but finding her, bringing her back. He wasn't sure when it happened, but by the time the sun began to rise, he found himself driving toward the edge of the city, toward a place he didn't even recognize. Naomi's friends hadn't heard from her. No one knew where she had gone. But there was one place Logan hadn't checked yet. One place that felt right. Her music. He drove faster now, his hands gripping the steering wheel with purpose. Naomi had once told him how much the sound of a violin had meant to her in her darkest moments. The music had been her sanctuary when everything else had failed her. It was where she had first found solace when the world had turned its back on her. If there was anywhere she would go, it would be there. Logan parked in front of an old, run-down music hall at the city's edge. It looked forgotten, abandoned, its windows clouded with years of dust. Yet, as he stepped out of the car, the faintest sound of a violin drifted through the air, a mournful, haunting melody that tugged at his heart. His legs moved before his mind could catch up. As he entered the building, the musty air hit him, and the smell of old wood and aged velvet seemed to welcome him into the forgotten corners of the world. The sound of the violin grew louder, and his heartbeat quickened. He rounded a corner and found her, Naomi, sitting alone on the stage, the violin pressed gently beneath her chin, playing a haunting melody that seemed to echo every ounce of the pain she carried. Her eyes were closed, her face painted with sorrow, but her body was lost in the music. She was still running, still hiding. Logan hesitated for a moment, his chest tight with emotion. He knew he had to make her see him, to show her that he was willing to fight for her. For them. With a steadying breath, he stepped forward into the dim light, his voice low but filled with raw emotion. Naomi. Her bow stilled as she froze mid-note, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, she opened her eyes, but she didn't look at him. Her gaze was cast downward, as though she couldn't bear to face him. I thought you might be here, Logan continued, his voice cracking slightly as he walked closer. You've always hidden behind your music when the world becomes too much. But Naomi, I can't keep living like this. I can't let you disappear from my life." Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the violin down beside her. Her gaze was still lowered, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know the things I've done, Logan. You don't know who I really am." "Then let me," Logan said, kneeling down beside her. His heart was racing, but he needed her to understand. "You're not defined by your past. You're not defined by mistakes or things that were out of your control. You're defined by who you are now and who you are to me." Naomi bit her lip, her eyes still avoiding his. "But the world will always have its opinions," Logan interjected. "But it doesn't matter if you're with me. It only matters if you trust me, if you believe in us." She finally looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm scared, Logan. I'm scared of everything falling apart. I'm scared of being the one who brings you down." Logan reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You didn't bring me down, Naomi. You saved me. You saved me from a life of emptiness. I love you more than anything, and I'll fight for you, no matter what. But you have to let me in. You have to let me help you, or we'll never make it." She inhaled sharply, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to hold back the tears. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully look at him. The man who had never once faltered, never once questioned his love for her, despite the storm that surrounded them. Despite the dangers and the fears, Logan had never wavered. And now, in this quiet moment, she realized that she had been running from the one thing that could save her. From him. Her hands reached up, trembling as she cupped his face in return. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just afraid." Logan shook his head, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "You don't need to apologize. I know you've been through so much. But I'm here, Naomi. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with all the things left unsaid. Naomi took a deep breath, her body trembling in his arms as she finally allowed herself to lean into him. The weight that had held her for so long began to loosen, just a little. The fear of being unworthy, the fear of being too broken. She realized that with Logan, she didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be herself. She pulled back slightly, looking up into his eyes. "I don't know what's next, Logan, but I want to try. I want to be with you, if you'll still have me." Logan smiled, his heart swelling with love and relief. "I've always wanted you, Naomi. Always." He pulled her closer, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, they kissed. Not as two broken souls afraid of the world, but as two people who had found something rare and beautiful in the midst of the chaos. They kissed like they were both coming home. When they finally pulled apart, Logan whispered, "We'll face everything together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Naomi nodded, the shadows of her past no longer looming as large. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. With Logan by her side, she knew they could conquer anything. The days after Naomi's return were a blur, a delicate balance of healing and reawakening. Logan could feel the shift in their relationship. There was a new tenderness between them, a fragile thread of trust being rewoven between the spaces of their lives. It was raw, it was real, and it was everything they had both longed for, but never quite believed would happen. For Naomi, it felt as though she was emerging from a long, dark tunnel, her eyes adjusting to the light of a world she had once been afraid to trust. The shame that had clouded her vision for so long began to lift, piece by piece, as she and Logan spent more time together. Each quiet moment, each shared smile, each touch of affection was a small victory, a healing of wounds she had long kept hidden. But even as their bond deepened, the shadows of Naomi's past refused to stay silent. The media hadn't forgotten about her, and neither had the people who had once been her closest allies. Whispers still followed her everywhere she went, and while she was learning to stand stronger, the weight of what she had lost continued to haunt her. Logan watched Naomi struggle with this silently, the way her shoulders would tense when she thought no one was looking, the way her smile would flicker just for a moment when she passed a familiar face. It hurt him to see her carry such pain, but he knew, deep down, that it was something she would need to overcome herself. He couldn't fix it. He couldn't undo the damage her past had caused, but he could be there for her, just as he promised. He could love her unconditionally, and that love was something she was learning to trust more each day. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Naomi found herself standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. The world seemed so vast from this height, so full of possibilities. But the ghosts of her past still clung to her, and she couldn't help but wonder if the life she was starting to build with Logan would ever be truly free from them. Logan stood behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Naomi let out a quiet sigh, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm thinking about how hard it is to let go of the things that define you, even when you know you have the chance to start over. Those old habits, those fears, they follow you." He stepped closer, his hands now resting at her waist, pulling her slightly closer to him. "I know it's hard, but you're not alone in this anymore. You don't have to carry it all by yourself, Naomi." She turned to face him, searching his eyes for the truth in his words. And in that moment, she knew. She knew that Logan had never been just a temporary escape for her. He wasn't someone who was just passing through her life. He was home. He was a constant in a world that had always seemed unpredictable and unfair. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally believe that she deserved him. "I don't know how to let go of it all," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to forget who I used to be. I don't know how to live without that weight hanging over me." Logan cupped her face in his hands, gently wiping away the tear that had escaped down her cheek. "You don't have to forget. You just have to stop letting it control you. Stop letting it define you. And we'll do it together, one step at a time." Naomi closed her eyes at his touch, the warmth of his hands grounding her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future where she didn't have to hide anymore. A future where she could be both the woman she was and the woman she was becoming. But as they stood there, wrapped in the quiet comfort of each other, a knock on the door shattered the moment. Logan's jaw clenched instinctively, and Naomi could see the change in his expression. An old, familiar tension, the kind of tension that had once defined his world. He had worked so hard to shield her from it, to protect their space from the outside world. But she knew now that their peace would never be untouched. Logan walked to the door, his face set, and opened it to find a man standing there, holding a letter. The man was sharp, dressed in a suit that looked far too out of place in their apartment. "Mr. Bennet," the man said, his voice cold and formal, "this is for you. It's urgent." Logan took the letter without a word, his eyes scanning the paper before he turned back to Naomi. His face had gone pale, and Naomi's heart skipped in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Logan didn't answer right away. He simply handed her the letter, his hand shaking slightly. Naomi's eyes widened as she read the words. The letter was from a lawyer, one she recognized immediately, the same lawyer who had once been her father's. The letter was a demand, a threat that sent a chill straight to her core. It was from the very people who had once orchestrated the fall of her family. They were coming after Logan now. They were coming after him because of her. Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. She could hear Logan's voice, calm yet sharp, but all she could focus on were the words in the letter. It said that her past was about to destroy him. It said that if Logan didn't sever his ties with her, the repercussions would be catastrophic. The shadows that had followed her were reaching out now to take him down as well. "Logan," she whispered, looking up from the letter, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't want any of this to happen. I never wanted to pull you into this mess." Logan's expression softened, and he took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You didn't pull me into anything. I chose this, Naomi. I chose you, and I'm not going to let them tear us apart." But Naomi could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that this time they wouldn't be able to outrun their past. The weight of everything, of their love, of their future, seemed to press down on them both, and Naomi realized that their journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. For a moment they stood there in silence, the world outside still spinning, the unknown pressing closer. But Logan's hand on hers gave her a fleeting sense of security, a reminder that together they could face whatever came next. Naomi wasn't alone anymore. Not in this fight. Not ever again. The days following the letter were a whirlwind, each one filled with uncertainty and tension. Logan could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. The threats from Naomi's past were no longer whispers. They had become a reality. Every move he made seemed to draw him closer to a precipice, and Naomi felt it too. The guilt that had long haunted her reared its ugly head once again, threatening to tear apart everything she and Logan had fought so hard to build. But Logan never wavered. Even as his board, his investors, and the public turned against him, he stood by Naomi, unwavering in his commitment to her. It didn't matter to him what the world thought. She was his, and he would never abandon her, no matter how deep the shadows of her past stretched. One night, after a particularly long meeting with his legal team, Logan came home late, exhausted, and drained from the stress that seemed to be never-ending. As he entered their apartment, he saw Naomi sitting by the window once again, looking out at the city lights. Her violin sat beside her, untouched. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were filled with something new, something raw, vulnerable, and full of love. She stood slowly, walking toward him with a sense of purpose that Logan had never seen before. "I'm sorry," Naomi whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to drag you into all of this. I never wanted you to have to carry this burden. You should be free of it, Logan." Logan stepped forward, closing the space between them. His heart ached as he looked into her eyes. "You're not a burden, Naomi, and neither is our love. We've been through so much together already. This is just another challenge, and we'll face it the same way we've faced everything else. Together." Naomi shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "But what if it's too much? What if it's all too much for you to handle?" Logan cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. "I've handled it because I love you. You're worth every risk, every challenge, every sacrifice. I've always known that, and I always will." She looked up at him, her heart swelling with love and fear, both conflicting inside her. "But my past, Logan, it's always going to be there, lurking in the shadows. I can't keep running from it. I can't keep hiding it from you." Logan smiled softly, pulling her into his arms. "Then don't. Stop hiding. Let me carry the weight with you. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be real. Together." For the first time in weeks, Naomi felt the heavy burden in her chest start to lift, just a little. The truth had always been the hardest thing for her to face. Not just the truth about her past, but the truth about who she was with Logan. She was terrified of losing him, terrified that her past would destroy their future. But standing here, with his arms around her, she realized something that took her breath away. He wasn't going anywhere. He was choosing her, no matter what. "I'm not perfect, Logan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm broken. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix myself." "You don't have to," Logan said gently, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "You don't need to be fixed. I don't need perfection, Naomi. I need you. Just you." Her heart swelled in her chest as she clung to him, allowing herself to finally believe in what he was saying. His love for her wasn't conditional. It wasn't about fixing her past or making her whole. It was about accepting her as she was, broken pieces and all. And for the first time in her life, Naomi allowed herself to let go of the shame, the fear, and the guilt that had haunted her for so long. She didn't need to carry it alone anymore. She didn't need to hide. The next morning, Logan made a bold decision. With Naomi by his side, he held a press conference, one that would change everything. The media had been relentless, speculating and spreading rumors about Naomi's past, twisting her story into something unrecognizable. But Logan was done hiding. He was done allowing others to control the narrative of their lives. As he stood before the cameras, his voice steady, he addressed the world for the first time, with Naomi beside him. "I've spent my life building an empire, fighting for success and control. But now, I'm fighting for something more important than all of that. I'm fighting for the woman I love, for the woman who has stood by me through everything. And I'm here today to tell you that her past does not define her. It doesn't define who she is or who she will become. I will stand by her, no matter what, and I will fight for our future." Naomi's heart raced in her chest as the room fell silent. The weight of the world seemed to shift in that moment, and she realized that she wasn't just standing beside Logan. She was standing with him, united in a way she had never felt before. Together, they were stronger than any obstacle that came their way. The days that followed were not easy. The media storm was fierce, and there were still challenges ahead. But Logan's declaration had done something powerful. It had silenced the critics and the doubters. It had given Naomi the strength to stand tall, to face the world and her past, with Logan by her side. Months later, as they stood together on the steps of a quiet courthouse, Naomi felt a peace she had never known. Logan held her hand tightly, His fingers intertwined with hers as they prepared to take the next step. The past had been a storm, but now it was behind them. They had built something new, something beautiful, together. Naomi looked up at Logan, her eyes shining with gratitude and love. "You were right," she whispered. "We've been through everything together. And now, we're ready for the rest." Logan smiled, his heart full. "This is just the beginning, Naomi. Together, we can face anything." With a soft laugh, she leaned into him, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Side by side, always.